The Sarek did not accept the first defeat. Empires never do. What happened at Fort Calder was studied, dissected, and argued over for 6 straight weeks in chambers lit by conquest maps and old victories. Entire schools of strategic thought rose and died in that time. One faction argued the humans had committed hidden elite troops. One argued the base had been an experimental war zone disguised as an ordinary installation. One faction, much smaller and much less popular, suggested the awful possibility that the Sarek had simply encountered the army in its natural habitat and lost honestly. That faction was ignored. The dominant conclusion became something far more comforting. Luck. The humans had been lucky. The timing had favored them. The first waves had landed too close. Their officers had underestimated the installation. The convoy flanking action had been accidental. The NCOs had improvised beyond reasonable expectation. The whole thing had turned on coincidence, caffeine, and bad tactical geometry, which meant, by Sarek logic, it could be corrected. So, the Empire authorized a second surprise operation. Smaller, sharper, faster, no daylight shock landing, no broad front insertion. No assumption that a major installation could be snapped cleanly in the first hour. This time they would strike the outskirts of another army base in darkness, infiltrate softly, identify patterns, seize key personnel, and gut the response before the army even understood it had company. Field Prefect Sal heard the mission outline and felt his soul begin packing a bag. He objected immediately. He pointed out, calmly and in writing, that humans did not become less dangerous at night. He pointed out that Army installations contained not only organized fighting units, but off-base traffic, shift turnover, support personnel, fuel points, motor pools, gate guards, barracks soldiers, and the mysterious but apparently unkillable species known as sergeants. He was ignored with the kind of imperial confidence that only comes after one has learned absolutely nothing. The target this time was Fort Rainer, a sprawling army post outside a dry southern city, where the base bled into civilian roads, gas stations, strip malls, fenced storage lots, and neighborhoods full of off-post soldiers who woke before dawn and drove in angry. The Sarek loved it. Messy perimeter, multiple access roads, civilian clutter, reduced defensive clarity. It looked weaker than Fort Calder. That was their first mistake. Their second was landing near the service station just outside the east gate. Their third was touching the refrigerator. At 4:58 local time, the service station looked half alive. The parking lot held pickup trucks, 2 battered sedans, 1 faded motorcycle, and a line of Army personnel in varying states of legal wakefulness. Some wore OCP uniforms, bloused and neat. Some were half-zipped into fleece layers. One had body armor in the back seat. Another was still in PT gear with boots untied. Most held either coffee, nicotine, or the desperate 1,000-yard stare of people not yet fully attached to reality. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over a scene recognizable across military culture. Coffee station under siege. Breakfast rollers turning slowly in glass. 3 soldiers arguing over whose card had declined. A specialist in front of the energy drink cooler, staring at the choices like a priest before sacred texts. A staff sergeant at the register buying black coffee, 2 tornadoes, and something called mango carnage, for reasons no doctor would approve. Specialist Boone, now transferred, resentful, and still somehow alive, was there too, waiting behind a lieutenant who had forgotten his wallet and was trying to negotiate with the cashier like a hostage mediator. Across from him stood Sergeant Morales, who had either chosen not to sleep or had simply evolved beyond the requirement. Morales held a foam cup of coffee in one hand and looked at Boone with the expression of a man pre-blaming him for the future. "You're late." Boone checked the wall clock. "I'm 2 minutes early." "You're late in your heart." Before Boone could answer, the front doors exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the tile. Cold morning air rushed in. And into the service station stepped a Sarek boarding trooper, armored, towering, weapon raised, eyes burning red behind his helmet optics. For half a second, nobody moved. It was too absurd, too close, too bright, too ordinary a place for interstellar terror. The alien activated his translator and barked, "Human personnel, comply immediately! You are now subject to Sarek authority!" A private near the coffee machine blinked once and slowly lowered his powdered donut. The cashier said, "Aw, hell!" The trooper advanced one step farther into the store. "Drop all weapons! Kneel! Identify command elements!" Nobody answered. Not because they were brave, because they were still processing the fact that the alien was standing between them and the coffee. Then the alien made the worst tactical decision in the history of his species. He turned slightly, saw the refrigeration wall full of energy drinks, assumed it was some kind of nutritional storage, and fired. The plasma blast hit the cooler dead center. Glass detonated, metal screamed, shelves collapsed, a river of Monster, Rockstar, Bang, Rain, C4, and unholy gas station stimulants exploded across the floor in a foaming tidal wave of chemical neon. 3 cans spun through the air in slow motion. One bounced off Boone's shoulder, one burst against the donut rack, one hit Morales in the chest and exploded down the front of his uniform. Silence filled the service station. Not fear. Something much older and much more dangerous. Personal offense. The alien's visor flickered as it tried to interpret the emotional shift. He did not understand what he had done. To the Sarek, he had destroyed containers. To the humans, he had just vaporized the morning survival mechanism of half a dozen army personnel standing 2 hours from full consciousness. Sergeant Morales looked down at the sticky fluorescent fluid running across his boots. Then he looked up at the alien and said very clearly, "You shot the fridge." Nobody later agreed on who moved first. Boone claimed it was Morales. Morales claimed it was the staff sergeant at the register. The cashier insisted it was the lieutenant, which nobody believed because he had the bone density of wet cardboard. What mattered was that the whole service station exploded into violence at once. The alien got one more shot off. It scorched the hot dog roller. Then 6 angry soldiers hit him from different directions like a forklift accident made of hate. Coffee flew. Breakfast sandwiches hit the ceiling. A private tackled one alien leg while Boone slammed a wire basket over the helmet. The cashier hit him with a mop bucket. Morales, screaming in a tone later described as administratively lethal, drove him backward into the lottery display. The alien crashed down hard, weapon lost, limbs pinned under a storm of enraged army bodies. Outside, his squad heard the screaming and started toward the entrance. Then they stopped. Because their trooper's upper body suddenly appeared in the doorway, crawling. He had made it halfway out of the ruined service station on elbows and one shattered knee. His helmet was gone. His face was bloodied. One hand stretched toward his squad. He looked up at them in pure animal panic. Then, before their eyes, something grabbed his ankles and dragged him backward across broken glass into the store. He screamed the whole way. The doors swung once, twice, then stopped moving. For one frozen second, the squad simply stared. The parking lot lights buzzed. Somewhere inside the store, a display stand fell over. Then the first army soldier came out through the doorway at a dead sprint, still holding half a broken coffee pot. He was followed by Boone carrying the alien rifle wrong but enthusiastically, then by Morales with an expression that belonged on a wanted poster, then by every other furious caffeine-deprived human in the building. The Sarek squad did not get a defensive line formed, not even close. One trooper got hit with a fire extinguisher hard enough to buckle armor. Another was shoved into the gas pump bollards and beaten with a windshield squeegee. One tried to raise his rifle and got tackled under the hood of a pickup truck by a corporal still wearing PT shorts under his jacket. And through all of it, Sergeant Morales kept shouting the same thing. "He shot the fridge! He shot the fridge!" The cry spread immediately, gaining power from repetition. More off-post soldiers were already pulling into the lot for their morning stop. They saw broken glass, aliens, angry uniforms, and a stream of neon energy drink flooding out the doorway. One sergeant first class jumped out of his truck, took one look, and asked no questions whatsoever. He simply grabbed a tire iron and joined in. By the time the East Gate Quick Reaction Force arrived from base, the service station fight was over. Every alien in the squad was dead. The service station windows were gone. The cooler section had ceased to exist as a concept, and Army personnel, still technically en route to work, were standing in the parking lot breathing hard and looking around for more targets. One private, bleeding from the forehead, held up the crushed remains of an energy drink can and asked with deep sorrow, "Are these reimbursable?" No one answered because that was when the QRF vehicles screeched in, and everyone had to begin the awkward process of explaining why the war had restarted at a gas station. The problem for the Serek was not that they lost the squad. It was what the loss revealed. The Eastgate service station was not a military facility. It was a roadside stop, a place soldiers used because the coffee was barely acceptable, the breakfast food was legally questionable, and the refrigerator wall glowed like a shrine to chemically assisted survival. If a random patrol could be torn apart there by off-base soldiers who had not even clocked in yet. What exactly counted as the safe part of an Army installation? Sal knew the answer immediately. There wasn't one. He also knew, from long traumatic familiarity, what was about to happen next. The service station incident would spread through the Army faster than any official alert. Not because of command channels, because soldiers talk, because NCOs gossip with intent, because everybody knows somebody at another gate, another motor pool, another brigade, another shift. Within 40 minutes, the story had mutated into myth. At one motor pool, the tale became that aliens had executed a direct anti-caffeine strike. At another, it became that a full Serek platoon had been killed by one outraged staff sergeant and a case of mango-flavored rage drink. At the barracks, the version going around was that the alien had disrespected the tornado rack, which made the response legally justified. Every version had the same ending. The aliens had touched the wrong thing. And now the Army was mad again. The second invasion widened before sunrise. The Serek had landed soft across several sectors around Fort Rainer, trying to avoid the blunt force mistake they made at Fort Calder. Instead of smashing the gates first, they moved through access roads, maintenance lots, power substations, family housing edges, and training corridors. That looked smarter on paper. In reality, it meant their smaller elements kept running into pockets of Army life before they were ready. One infiltration team entered a laundry annex behind family quarters and discovered 12 soldiers already there because the machines worked better off hours. The soldiers, initially terrified, became homicidal when a plasma blast melted 3 uniforms and a duffel bag containing a promotion packet. Another squad tried to secure a traffic circle near an on-post coffee stand and got hit by 2 fuelers, a military police truck and a civilian contractor in a golf cart who apparently assumed all of this had become his business. A recon unit cut through an outdoor smoking area behind Battalion HQ and found itself surrounded by soldiers who, according to later comm intercepts, hadn't had nicotine yet and therefore could not be reasoned with. At 6:12, a Serek officer reported in disbelief that humans were fighting pre-enraged. He was correct. The Army was not merely awake. It had been inconvenienced. That changed everything. Saal watched the tactical feed collapse from orbit and realized the Empire was about to make the same mistake twice in different terrain. This time, the pattern was even clearer. The Army did not need clean preparation time to become dangerous. It did not even need to be on duty. It simply needed a reason. And the Serek, through an almost artistic sequence of poor choices, had now provided several. He listened to incoming reports as whole sectors curdled into absurdity. One patrol was cut down near a vehicle wash rack by mechanics armed with pressure hoses, sidearms, and improvised blunt instruments. Another lost its point element after entering a fitness trail where PT soldiers used the darkness, tree lines, and personal hatred of being interrupted before sunrise to devastating effect. But the service station massacre remained the story that poisoned everything else, because every soldier on Fort Rainier understood it emotionally. They might not understand orbital strategy. They might not understand the alien command structure. They might not even understand the bigger war yet. But they understood this. The aliens had shot the energy drinks. That made the invasion personal. And personal, Sal had learned, was where humans became hard to model. By 800 hours, Fort Rainier was no longer an infiltration battle space. It was a hunt. The Sarek were still dangerous, faster, stronger, better armed, technologically superior in clean contact. But clean contact had become impossible. Every road held waiting vehicles. Every low building might hide angry support troops. Every gate had doubled in guns and bad mood. Every story of alien success was immediately answered by some other story of human overreaction. And somewhere across the base, because the Army was apparently incapable of experiencing apocalyptic violence without also creating memes, someone had spray-painted on a wall, "Don't touch the monsters." No explanation followed. None was needed. By the time Sal pushed the recommendation for immediate withdrawal up the chain, he already knew what the humans would say afterward. The aliens had come back. They had tried surprise again. And they had learned the same lesson in a different place. The Army might look disorganized. It might look tired, undercaffeinated, sarcastic, and spiritually held together by lower back pain and hate. But it was not fragile. It was territorial. And if you started your invasion by destroying the morning caffeine supply of a bunch of soldiers heading to work, well, that was less a tactical decision than a form of assisted suicide. The retreat began before noon. This time, no one in the Sarek High Command pretended it was orderly. Dropships pulled out under immediate pursuit. Army aircraft harried them. Vehicles chased liftoff zones. On 3 separate roads, soldiers used civilian gas station signage as improvised rally points because everyone understood the one where they shot the fridge better than grid coordinates. The final image transmitted from the service station sector before the Sarek net collapsed showed the storefront in ruins, the parking lot scorched, 2 alien bodies half under a pickup, and Sergeant Morales standing under a flickering sign holding a fresh coffee someone had handed him after the fight. The surviving Sarek analysts would replay that frame for years. Not because it showed defeat, because it showed something more terrible. A human military culture capable of absorbing surprise planetary attack, turning a roadside breakfast stop into a massacre site, then immediately resuming caffeine operations. That was not a species to invade casually. That was a species with systems. Bad systems, loud systems, ugly systems, but systems. And now the Sarek had reason to suspect something even worse. If the Army could do this in 1s and 2s on the way to work. Part 3 to come. Stay up to date by clicking subscribe and giving the bell a ring to be alerted on the day of release. Thank you for listening.